do you feel now after this book, after this story, which we Italians we hear about every day, we possibly live every day? How are your feelings now after performing and after reading this?
I think one of the reasons that I signed up to this project was because all we were sending on an email asking for writers was this little synopsis of the story. And I think that just the synopsis about Samir's story moved me so much that I thought this is really important to make into theatre and expose the issue.
With my, it's very similar to Izzy actually, what you were just saying there, because when you read the synopsis and you hear this is a true story of someone who had so much talent and not just talent but just drive, determination that's quite rare. I think you don't meet many people who would go out and train hours and hours every day in the conditions that she had to go through. And it's interesting because when you do see these sorts of things in the news, for example, it's a very, this is the sort of almost like block group. The refugees are here, they're coming here, here and here. And it's a very, I understand why it's reported like that, because it's difficult going to interview every single sort of traveller and their life story, but it also has a dehumanising effect, I think, on the general public. So I think, how many more girls or men are there like that, with these incredible, difficult lives, travelling from their homelands to a completely different region of the world that they're used to, just for their survival. And I think my reaction to it was, one, just shock at the actual story itself, because it does read like something out of a film directed by Steven Spielberg or something. It's that level of epic almost, I think, and yet it's taking place in a very real, what's the correct word? In a very real political turmoil, I suppose. And I suppose that was my reaction to it.
For me, just also doing the research and I'm just because before we when we were performing the play, we wanted to make sure that we were also pronouncing the words properly, like how they were called, because that really matters, I think. And when I was researching on Hayawan and Thyroid, and I was asking my friends who are Arab as well how to pronounce this, and then that's how we found the video as well at the end. So it's the sense of when these artists from in different African countries as well singing these songs about hearing the stories. And it's not just in Italy, right? So it's like these were, I think, about refugees going gently, and so it's the global scale of it really hits you. And I think on the small scale of like Samir's own personal story, I think that you can sort of get that feeling of how it's actually happening.
Any other question from the audience?
Well, just want to congratulate both teams for exceptional performance. As a non-expert, someone who doesn't do the theater much, sorry to my wife, for me it's been like a journey. Both teams took me on a journey, from nothing to a very emotional end. This team, I guess they provided an amazing overview of this story. The other team was like a telescope into 2-3 moments of this book. And by adding the 3 moments, they took me to the end. Instead, the first team was like an overview of the book. And I guess the 2 interpretations were fantastic in my opinion. So, no question, just congratulations to both of them.
Thank you.
I'm really curious to know how you guys even started the process of reducing the book down to a script. So did you have any strategies? How did you decide what to
so interesting. We started dramatizing the whole book, page by page, scene by scene. So that if, you know, our academic year is in 2 terms. So the first term, we started off in October, and we were like, okay, let's define the scenes we want to keep and we want to avoid, or we want to compress into one bigger scene. By the end of the term, we hadn't finished because we had this approach of like chronological sequence. So after the break, we were still there, and at some point, I think we just freaked out. We decided, okay, no, let's actually, how do we want to represent this? And that's when we introduced the flashback. So the meeting between Ali and Samia that happens after became the narrative plot. So it's the first and final scene of the first act. And that's when we realized that it wasn't about telling Katostella's stories, really. It was about telling our perception of this story and what's behind it. So what I found really interesting, and congratulations again, is that we are Italian and they're British or English or anywhere English speaking, Italian speaking, and I'd be really interested in seeing the reasons behind our choices. For example, us as Italian, we hear about migrants a lot, especially like on the famous boats, the big boats, and we know about their arrival. We hear a lot, you know, we hear a lot in the news what happens during the trip at sea. What we were interested in was what happens before, because these are lives, right? And what struck us in the book was that there's a whole journey before what we consider the journey. So for us, the migratory journey is the trip boat, then the boat trip. Whereas the journey, that's the end. For Samia, that was like hope. That was like, oh, I'm done now. It's the final bit. So the journey actually was the crossing the Sahara and arriving in Libya and the prisons and all that. Whereas for them, maybe the journey was, you know, what happens after. You know, we know how they live, we know their conditions, we don't know how they get here. I don't know, it would be interesting to analyse our perceptions. And yeah, to conclude for us, when we decided that it wasn't Katostella's book, but it was our adaptation, is where actually the play got into shape.
Did you guys have a similar approach to
I think actually we had quite an opposite opinion, an opposite way of looking at it, because as you say, for us we're less exposed to that final part of the journey, so we didn't and possibly couldn't have the attitude of taking that as a given. So I think that a large part of what we did was we took Hodan as a narrator, which is in itself looking at the end of the journey and how, like, the aftermath of the journey. And we also, like, we didn't even end with the journey, it was Hodan's reaction to after the journey. So whereas you were saying you focused a lot on the beginning, for us I think it was a lot more, we focused on this is how they get into the situation and then this is the journey. And that was more what we focused on rather than...
And also continuation of the journey, because it's also Hodan and Samia and then Hodan's daughter, right? And also because Hodan herself makes the journey, and she survives and she has a good life, but Samia doesn't.
Yeah.
So we're interested in playing that kind of like multiple journeys, different fates that happen during this journey. The forces that push the person on this journey, the forces that hold them back. And this idea of the sea and the racetrack, kind of a sort of cycle. More. That's why I guess it was more symbolic. Yeah.
Just step in. I mean, obviously I'm not a specialist in the field, and I come just to observe. One thing I have, I'm not bicultural. I'm of Italian origin and I've been here for nearly 40 years. So I've absorbed the British culture. One thing really was, out of the whole beautiful performances, one thing that was really touching to me was the final count of deaths, which is not in the book. So I read books, but it's not in the book. That was your adaptation, your interpretation as Italians. I'm pretty sure as Italians. So you need to explain to me why. Of the immense list, we haven't finished reading. And I recall, for instance, the dramatic scenes a couple of years ago with 300 and more coffins being shipped and laid down in Sicily, where 300 and more people died. So the sheer numbers we in Italy see, I see through the media. Compared to the few numbers and the concept of the fear of immigration that we have in this country, whether it's from Africa or from anywhere else, but it is the sheer numbers that we have been facing for the last 10 years in Italy, which is a political issue. I don't want to get involved in that. But can I ask you what brought you to end that piece in that way, which is not in the book? Not so you probably you wouldn't know about that, or you didn't perceive being beyond just a Samia story.
It was just like, it was back at night, and it was very late at night. We were working on the script, and we were really tired. It was like 3 a.m. writing in a room in this building. And we couldn't write a nice ending. I mean, an ending we agreed on. And we felt like Samia had too much relevance in a sense. And we started saying how we were following too much Capizzellas, but we weren't putting anything that was our interpretation, coming back to the thing I said before. And I just read an article earlier that day about the 49 immigrants held on a boat near Lampedusa, but since Sardinia blocked the ports, they couldn't, get in land. So I just had this idea to kind of give it a more universal kind of dimension, because yes, it's we started from Capizzella's book and Samia, but for us, Samia is one story representative of millions of stories. So from there, it kind of developed further, and we got to this kind of ending and wanted to recite names. And first, it just had to be the war, or that was I don't know. The war had to kind of speak these names out. But then we decided to give it a more kind of anxious dimension. So the immigrants had to say the other names. And then Benedetta found this horrifying list of 36,000 immigrants who died in a migratory journey. Real names. All real names. So we selected 100 that we could pronounce, and that were on that. They had taken the trip from Africa to Lampedusa, and then that was.
I suppose at one point it was clear that it was a wider story. It wasn't just Samia's; it was like everybody.
You get the sense of the immense numbers,
Exactly.
which I don't think we completely perceive here as yet. The tens of thousands compared to the hundreds. And I know it's a political issue, they can see as a political, but I think it's also in terms of perception of what the problems are. A few thousand miles away, which involve Europe, in a world which is said to be divisive rather than unifying. And this is really, it was a very, very touching. Very strong.
And this is also why Samia basically disappears in the second act, because it's not for her anymore. It's a power community.
We wanted her to be part of the migrants, not just her. So,
I think that the reason ours was so different is that, at least in my experience, in the media here, we get a lot of numbers, but it's just this many people, and you can't really understand that as people. You understand that as numbers, as just a figure. So for us, again, completely the opposite. It was important to establish these are people. And yes, we want Samia to be representative of the whole, but I think that from a British perspective, you have to understand the singularity of each of these people, because you can't see them as a whole.
Which is also, just to add on that point, why we showed some live clips from the Beijing Olympics, because although our piece took a symbolic overview of very brief scenes that eclipse her life, her childhood, and the journey she takes, and eventually her death at the end. We also wanted to sort of keep the audience grounded, I suppose, to an extent, and to say, well, this was a real girl, this is a real international event that she did take part in.
Can I congratulate all of you? It's been hugely entertaining, very moving. On a sort of, just want to kind of pull it back to what I was trying to say at the beginning about cultural difference. Within the Anglo-Saxon theatre, there is a very powerful, established realist tradition. You can see this on television, you can see this in actor training, you can see it in all sorts of ways. Whereas, of course, from the Italian perspective, there's quite a strong anti-realist tradition, and I found myself making notes as I was watching both of you to see the extent to which, whether consciously or unconsciously, you were both groups were picking up on that. But then the other thing is that you both of you found really clever ways of dealing with what is the classic problem for any translator. And that is what you do when you want, whether it's for theatre or for anything else, when you want your audience or your readers to understand certain things about the culture. And I'm sure you've all had this thing of, oh, do I add a footnote? No. So if I can't add a footnote, what do I do? Do I add some explanation? So how much explanation? What do I do? And you both found clever ways of dealing with that. And you used your audio-visual aids differently. One of the things I thought, for me, two of the most powerful moments were the very simple act of ripping up the Mo Farah photo. That's a very powerful scene. And that worked really, really well. And then on the Italian side, we've just heard of the final scene, but also dealing with the journey, with having us in virtual darkness, with the narration, and the bodies sort of bumping into one another. So these are actually very clever theatrical ways of adding, if you like, additional explanation. And I also noticed, this is just one, can I just say one final thing, in terms of you both faced with the problem of the war and Al-Shabaab. What do you do with that? You can hardly put a notice up behind saying Al-Shabaab is, etc. But you both found, again, quite clever ways of dealing with that. So the English group, your way was to, in a sense, to show the personal explanation behind the betrayal. What has Al-Shabaab done for me? Whereas what you guys did was to introduce a whole series of tensions within the family right from the beginning, which meant that by the time you got to the betrayal, I'm sitting here as a member of the audience and I'm sort of prepared for that betrayal because you've built in that tension. Whereas your group had gone from really what is almost an idyllic rendering of the family at the beginning, and then you get this terrible betrayal, but you also provided a rational explanation. But I thoroughly enjoyed both performances, so thank you.
Any other question or comment? Well, I would like to tell you a little bit about the whole process, basically. This was initiated by Francesca last year. Because, as I mentioned at the beginning, in my introduction, very short introduction, Francesca's been involved in various translations from literary texts, and Gianni Carofilio is our idol, isn't it? And last year they did, with a group of students, a fantastic semi-rehearsed reading with some acting of a short novel, a short story by Gianni Carofilio entitled Vigilia, about homeless people in the Stazione Termini in Rome. And again, they devised this fantastic, very, very short, it was only 15 minutes, wasn't it? 15 minutes rehearsed reading with some action, rendering of this short story on a very powerful, again, very powerful topic, homeless people and the perception and the lives of these homeless people. So they enjoyed it so much, and they were incredibly good again, that Francesca said, yeah, but next year, why don't we do a book?
No, I said, no. I said, why don't we do a play?
A play from a book, not a short story.
Yeah, I said, yes, no.
Yes, absolutely. And then when I thought, okay, book. A short story is bad enough, but a book is a nightmare, for me at least. So I went on holiday, and there is a lovely tiny bookshop in Palinuro, in a place where we go on holiday at the beach. And there's this, they've got very, very, very good selection of books. And I was just looking at books, and which book can I choose for having a theatre translation, and I bumped into this book by Giuseppe Cattozzella, which is not high literature in terms of a renowned author, but the topic was absolutely topical. So I bought it and I read it, and I found out that it had been translated in many languages, including English. So I brought it back, and I had this idea of having a parallel translation, looking at the different ways English speakers and English cultures, or British cultures, or English influenced cultures could approach this book, and Italian speakers and Italian cultured people could approach this book. So I set up this study, basically this type of exercise, academic exercise, and I contacted the English department, and therefore we went through a selection process, because there were applications to take part in the activity, and I made it clear right from the beginning, this is going to be tough, guys. This is not going to be an easy exercise. So I appreciate your overwhelming interest, but you have to be aware that we don't have much time. You're here to study other subjects and not to do theatre translation only. You have other commitments, social lives, you have your own lives. So you have to be aware that it's going to be tough. And that's what remained from
the survivors.
It is our survivors, yeah. The survivors. So, and when we created these two groups, I decided to have a blind type of procedure. So both groups were working on a parallel basis, and they did not know anything about the other group. And I kept it as secret as I could, because they both were like, what are they doing? What is the Italian doing? What are the English doing? I don't know. They're working hard, and that's enough for you. So this is very interesting, because I was very interested to see what different approach they would have, and they did have, as Susan has pointed out, and they were equally so beautifully performed and created. I have to say, Susan, after your comments, that they were both tempted to do a chronological account of the book, because the book is so powerful. The story is so catchy, so emotional, that it is natural to say, I want to say everything. I want to tell the whole story. I don't want to miss anything. Is this true? Yeah. And how much did you have to cut?
Out the script.
Because when we were meeting,
What was like
3 hours long.
This is Elizabethan theatre, this is not modern
But
theatre.
also the funniest point in this journey was when after, because Alessandra gave us completely blank page, so it was, you know, completely up to us what to do with it and how to write, how to do it. And after a whole term or term and a half, we finally saw Alessandra again, and we were there to explain what we've done. And we said this epiphany we've had. We finally decided to cut it and subvert the narrative plot and have 2 flashbacks. And she was like looking at us, oh, you finally got it then. And we were like, what? Ours was like revelation.
But that happened with your script as well. You started. Do you want to say something?
No, just in the very, very early sort of version of it, you know, we tried to sort of, we didn't quite go as meticulous as page by page because that takes the next level of commitment. But we had like, I think like 30 scenes or something, more scenes in her childhood. There was, yeah, so we did quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Because it was inevitable. But it was also very hard on my side to keep quiet because I knew that they were, you know, they were not following what the natural path towards a coherent play would be. But I couldn't interfere with your choices. I had to nag you to the point of saying, you know, have you thought about this? And have you know, maybe if you think about. But I had wanted so desperately to say, you don't want to tell the story. You want to approach it differently. And in fact, you did say, why did you say it in the beginning? Because I could say. But I'm very, very pleased to see that they depth in the analysis of the texts. And actually, I'm interested, you mentioned the language. Jenny, do you want to tell us a bit more about the language?
Yeah, I mean, like, it was tricky because we did want to bring in, you know, yeah, the Somali words, the Arabic words, and also Italian, which we did not dare to pronounce.
That you hired me.
On the audience, and yeah, I mean, in the end, I think we just brought over the most important ones, and I mean, in the end, the dialogue itself was quite naturalistic. Like, you know, we got, you know, phrases from the book and all that, like especially context as well. But that was more like just, you know, character to character interaction. The words, yeah, and also like abayo boy, like, yeah, it was quite a thing to learn. Like, okay, you know, how do we convey to the audience? Okay, abayo means sister and boy means brother, and there are simple tactics like, you know, Alessandra just. Okay, so that's like 4 lines that's to write.
This is the lesson from Eduardo De Filippo. In his plays, every time he was mentioning a new Neapolitan word, always immediately say, you know, the translation in Italian to make it understandable to the whole of Italy. Yeah, and how about you? How did you deal with the language?
With the African.
Yeah, yes, the African words and the mixture of language in play.
I mean, it was pretty obvious because at one point we were like, yeah, abayo, sister, a boy, brother, something like that. So it was pretty clear at the beginning when we said like you're the Heron, so yeah, you're like the specific tribe. Yeah. So we kind of wanted to make the words clear with the meaning instead of like explaining in an obvious way. It was just like, I don't know, it was just like how it was built.
The thing is, there's always more behind than what you can actually see. So we had so many symbolic layers in this play that weren't maybe obviously clear. They were the wall that was this figure constantly, you know, arriving in the play and doing things that were as well symbolic. And then even the language, we struggled because I had to sing, but I couldn't sing in Somali, like Somali songs, because that would have been cultural appropriation and it didn't sound right. So we had this whole session deciding that we wanted to create a bridge between our culture and the Somali culture to also, because we are Italian and we understand migration a certain way, and also we have our, not guilt, but we have our responsibility in this, topical issue. And so like having Italian songs that speak about, the destination and having another home, it was also like, there was a motive there. So, even the language had like many reasons behind it. And then, for example, the audience was supposed to be the sea. That's why at the beginning she was like, this is the sea. And then this is why she dies in the sea.
Anyway, we chose to keep the language, like the African words from the beginning, so it was a choice really.
But it was one of the things that actually are symbolic, but then you don't actually,
The man who adapts, or has adapted a very great deal for television, Andrew Davis, adapted a lot of novels. He and I used to do creative writing together because he taught at Warwick for some time. And I remember him doing this fabulous workshop on George Eliot. And he was doing Middlemarch at the time. Great big novel. And he said the problem with George Eliot is the weight of her language. And he pretended to be carrying great heavy suitcases. And he said, working with George Eliot is like working with somebody carrying massive heavy suitcases. But you can't do that for contemporary audiences. So what are contemporary audiences carrying when they travel? What kind of luggage? And I thought this was such a brilliant way of getting into thinking about a great Victorian novelist. Yes, of course she's carrying heavy suitcases because that's how the Victorians travelled. So now let's rethink, and how do we travel today? And so what would be the linguistic equivalents of travelling in the 21st century?
No more questions? No comments or anything?
Sorry, just because of that, because actually when I was trying to search to get the accurate pronunciation of the words, it was quite challenging because it's difficult even online to find pronunciation of Somali words. I have African friends who have Somali friends, so. But like I say, the Arab words I could find a friend, but even the higher one was easy. But Tarik was actually quite difficult. Because Tarik was, she was like, Tarik, that certainly would be like escape. But it doesn't mean like, I was like, okay, but I'm trying to say like illegal migrant, which is what is it in the book. Then she's like, okay, maybe it's like Tarik, which is a different kind of, but that has to do with, trafficking, smuggling. I'm like, okay, yeah, I think that is the one. So, but then that's what made me went online to search. To find was very good. And that's how, as like I say, the video again, which then in the singer, he says it Tarik. So I was like, okay, that's fine. But even these sort of changes in meaning, and she was like, no, I've never heard of it in this context of smuggling, or in her first, but it's escape. So, but it's close. There is this sense of escape.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and then I was also looking for articles on like how to come about that, just to find the pronunciation. Yeah.
It's amazing. Just pronunciation, you've done such deep research. Very, very.
These Somali YouTubers trying to understand. I'm not even joking. The Somali YouTubers trying to understand how they pronounce Abayo, Abowe.
Yes. Yeah, and then we were like, how do you pronounce that word? And she's like, I know everything!
Even the names like Odan,
Samia. The whole first time we pronounced Samia, and then we found out it was Samia, so we were like, oh my god, it's Samia! So we just kept,
Yeah, she can't even pronounce her own names.
Yeah! And one point we decided, if we get it wrong in the play, we're like, you don't even remember my name all the time!
Because we kept on getting things wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So, thank you very, very much for coming. Thank you very much for giving us such beautiful, beautiful performances, and for all the hard work you've done, and and the pleasure that you've given us and me in going through this journey with you, which is a much more joyful and playful journey than the one that so many migrants go through. So thank you very much.